Okay, so I'm going to admit them.
We'll go ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started shortly. We're just letting people come on. Appreciate everyone's time today. Mickey, let's give it another minute. I see people coming in, signing in from the waiting room, so we'll go ahead and get started in just a moment. Kathleen, how's the waiting room looking? Do we have mostly everyone on now? We're anticipating.
I've disabled, so people are going to come straight in.
Perfect. Mickey, whenever you're ready, I think we can go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, thank you, Caitlin. And first of all, hi, everyone. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to jump on this call with us. This is a call intended to talk specifically about the knowledge advisory forum that's being proposed, Binoco and the knowledge communities, and focus on the initial recommendations we've had with our previous discussions and previous interactions with our committee, our task force, various member groups, yourselves, and really want to take this opportunity to allow you to, again, ask questions, give us your input, talk about whatever's on your mind, but this particular topic. We are in the next phase of our work, which is really starting to dig into the details of the recommendations, which is what we've heard from a lot of people asking when that's going to be. We are going to go through this process, and we will take as long or as short as it needs to get it to a point where we can present it. So there is no timeline on this other than making sure that we're connecting with as many people as possible and being able to take as much input as possible and try and, really look at how everything fits into our models. So again, I appreciate it. I appreciate your input, and the task force has been working real hard on this, and really thrilled with their activity and the dedication they've had. I want to thank everybody on the task force for that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susanna and Caitlin to tee us up and then get you all started in terms of your input. So thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks, Mickey. Hi, everyone. I'm Susanna Kelly, and I am with McKinley Advisors. I've been supporting this project through the last year to help gather some research and some insights and facilitate the task force conversation to bring forward some recommendations for changes to AIA's governance structure. I recognize a lot of names on the call today because you've been in other town hall settings. You've connected with us in other ways, which is really great. And I thank you so much for continuing on this journey with us. As Mickey said, we've advanced the recommendations to a deeper level of specificity, which is what you see in the materials that were shared out. And Kathleen's put the document in the chat if you need an easy reference. We're focused today on the recommendations related to knowledge, and I want to get us started with some questions. This is interactive. This is discussion. We're not going to be talking at you and sharing a lot of slides this time. We want to hear from you and hear your feedback on this latest round of revisions. So a couple of things with the Knowledge Advisory Forum. In fact, I would say this is one of the areas where we've provided much more detail than was provided before in the previous iterations that you saw. You probably saw a box on the right-hand side of a triangle, upside down triangle, talk generally about this idea of a Knowledge Advisory Forum, but there really wasn't a lot of specifics there, right? So what you're seeing here is a compilation of a few things. One is advancing the recommendations, getting more specific, documenting conversations that the task force has had, just to provide clarity, yeah? The other piece, though, is responding to feedback that we've already gotten through the process of previous town halls that we've done, input that's come in through the comment form, conversations. Susan Chin, who's our representative on the task force, has been having conversations with a number of KC leaders. So that's reflected here too. And what you'll see is also some options for consideration where we really want to get your input. So it's fair game, comment on anything. As I'm going through this, I'll prompt you with some questions, but feel free to use the chat as well for other things that might come up as we're talking. And the first area that I want to kind of focus us in on is around the name of this group. We've gotten some feedback that, well, first of all, names matter, right? They mean different things to different people. And sometimes we describe groups because it is something that sounds really good, right? Especially as architects and designers, we tend to lean towards that. We want to make sure it's clear what this group is all about and what their charge is. There's been some reaction that some folks have said, why are we changing this away from Bonoko? Why not just keep it Bonoko, but change the composition? It's a fair question. Knowledge Advisory Forum. Well, does that appropriately capture the purpose of liaison and advising the board in this overall, kind of cross-cutting group? Another suggestion that's come forward has been to call it a council that mirrors the strategic council that exists today. Strategic council, separate conversation. We're going to have that on Wednesday, but that is focused in on geographic representation, component representation. The knowledge forum, or maybe council, is really about cross-cutting knowledge topic areas and areas of practice. So a few ideas here throwing out for the group. And I'm curious to get your reaction. The intent is really to have more consistency across the Institute in terms of what we're calling different groups, but what name is resonating with you? And tell us a little bit about why. Oh, I see George raised his hand because there was a long enough gap of silence that it became uncomfortable. And so he volunteered. But also I see, um, forgive me, I'm going to mispronounce your name, Mabuba.
Yes, how are you?
Hi.
Yeah, I'm the chair of Public Architecture Knowledge Committee, and
Great.
I honestly did not understand what Bonoko was. When Eddie came in first, I had to ask her. So I do appreciate the name change. I don't know exactly what, but Knowledge Council sounds right. Something that relates to that word, knowledge.
Yeah, okay. Great feedback. George, you want to chime in? You got to come off mute though. So close.
So
Yes.
I'm first of all thankful to have this opportunity to have this discussion. It's really great, and thanks, Mickey, for your leadership with the team. It's really terrific to get to this point. I may be the only one on the call that really was around with Bonoko was established, and I was chair of Bonoko, and I kind of agree that the name is kind of strange, and but those of us who lived through it understood what it was, and it was really the opportunity to have all of the knowledge communities give input to the board, um, in the activities which we thought the board should really be addressing. I think that we should change the name. I'm all in favor of it. And there is some kind of some synergy to the notion that you'd have another council which is all about knowledge rather than geography. So I kind of like the idea of council, and maybe though it should say the Knowledge Advisory Council. So there's a third one. I mean, the role, being the council giving advice is really important because you want to make sure that the board ultimately has the responsibility for making decisions, in my view, to support the entire membership. And I think saying that it's a council aligns with the strategic council, but it also is an advise. It's known that the knowledge community is an advisory groups. I'm thinking Knowledge Advisory Council is clear.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Other thoughts?
There's a couple of questions, I think, in the chat as
Yep,
well.
we have a hand raised too.
Okay.
Joshua, why don't you go and then we'll catch up in the chat.
Yeah, I was just I had a question in the chat. I was curious if what you're calling the constituency groups, if they are currently members of Bonoco.
Yes, this is a very good question. Um, and something I hope we get a chance to talk about here. Constituency groups, that's not a good term either, but the associates, the NAC, the YIF, small firms, those groups would be represented on the Knowledge Advisory Forum, or council, whatever we call it. So I think the intent here to clarify representation is that there would be representatives from those groups. Now, how many representatives, I think, is something we still have to talk about. But the idea is that they would be a part of this forum.
So does that mean that those groups? I know that a number of those groups were going to be getting potentially board seats in the governance reshifting. Does that mean that they are no longer getting board seats?
Yep, another good question. So the associate representative remains on the board. That's been a long-standing position. There is no YIF seat or College of Fellows seat or small firm seat today.
Right.
The revised proposal recommends pulling back those other constituency seats that were previously recommended. And the reason why is because we feel like there is a pathway for all of those groups to be in different seats on the board. And with the candidate development committee's help, we can make sure we have a robust candidate pool for election each year and ensuring that we have a good representation across all of those constituency groups. So associates being, and by the way, students also are in there. Student AIS is also a separate seat. CASE is also a separate seat. Those two groups do not have another pathway to the board, right? As a student, you can't run for an AIA seat. As an associate, you can. There's a limit to the number of seats on the board that are allowed to be associates. But historically, we haven't seen a large number of associates being elected into those other seats. So the recommendation is to reserve that seat right now to make sure that we have representation from voices in the associate category.
So I sort of think that's problematic because those organizations already are representative. That I believe all of them have state representatives, and
They do.
right.
Yes.
Whereas the KCs do not, and I think to treat them as equal. And I sit on the board of SFX, and I sit on the board of the IDKC, so I understand both sides of this. And I really think there are different types of groups and different types of organizations, and I do think that what you're calling constituency groups should have board seats because they are, more directly connected to the state chapters and the sections through that conduit of the state reps. And I think there's certainly the knowledge communities, people who are passionate about those particular issues, should be engaged and through this reorganization that you're talking about. Absolutely. I think that's great. But I do think that those four groups are unique and different in that way and should be treated as such.
Appreciate that feedback. Thank you. There's a question in the chat I want to get to here. And I wonder if I might call on Susan Chin to help me with this response. So Laura is asking if the task force can explain why the KAF was originally moved away from being a board committee into this entity that balances out the council. And I know we have a few task force members here, but I wonder if we could get that feedback from a task force member.
Susanna, I'm not clear. I mean, I feel like a board committee has a similar standing to the what we're proposing as a knowledge advisory forum. Um, that there are seats on the board, that there is voice for knowledge. So Laura, if you could dig a little deeper into or explain a little bit more about your question.
Yeah, maybe something must have prompted the group to pull out what I'll call Bonoko now into something other than a board committee. But as you guys were talking earlier, it did sound like it was still acting like a board committee. It's advising the board on
Okay.
different things. And so I was wondering, what was it that prompted that sort of extraction
Okay.
from the
All right.
board
Thank you.
committees?
So in our discussions, in our early discussions, and after receiving some feedback from all of you, um, we had an in-depth and robust discussion about subject matter experts and how the Institute brings knowledge, since 58% of our members belong to, as you know, sitting on Bonoko, belong to the knowledge communities and engage with the AIA through that lens, not necessarily serving in local and state representation in their components. And so we felt that having knowledge as something that is offered to both members and to the profession, um, so many of our folks come to convention, to or conference, come to the various KCs, various forums or AIAU events. And so how do we lift up knowledge in a broad sense to bring that benefit to our members and to the profession? So that was the reason why it was pulled out, if you want to call it pulled out, from being not just. Board committees are very important.
Susan, can I add one
I
other?
appreciate that, Susan.
Okay,
Thank you.
sorry. Go
I just want to
ahead.
add one other piece of context. Sorry, Jessica O'Donnell. I'm also on the task force. And as many of you have probably seen the varying org charts that exist for AIA, there's a lot of things going on. It can be very confusing. It can be very overwhelming to understand where you might fit in that overall ecosystem. So there was a lot of task force discussion on if someone just looks at the org chart and wants to know their pathway into AIA and into leadership, generally that falls into two buckets. Usually there's a knowledge pathway and a representative pathway. And that's what we were trying to convey with, we'll call it the Strategic Council and the Knowledge Advisory Forum, those being the two main pathways to leadership.
Thank you both. That was helpful clarification. Raya, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a question. Maybe it is maybe advanced to the discussion, like maybe it's later, but I'm just going to ask it.
Sure.
But I want to first say thank you, Mickey, and everyone on the team. It's an amazing effort. I went through it, and something come to mind when I looked at it, and it's related to two things: function and authority. So I would like to know, how does the Knowledge Advisory Forum translate its insight into actual board decisions? Like, what is the defined path from input into action? Like, because I'm not envisioning it, how it is set up now. And the other question is related to authority. Is the role of the Knowledge Advisory Forum purely advisory, or is there a defined expectation that its input does translate into an informed board direction? Thank you.
Before I jump in here, I just want to check to see if any of our task force members want to chime in first. I can get us started. How about that? These are great questions. I will actually start with with what I think is your second question around authority and this term advisory. So again, as Jessica mentioned, and Susan also, thinking about pathways to leadership, but also the role of coordinating activities across the Institute, particularly with knowledge. I think this is one of the most important things that bubbled up in our task force conversations, and that is the duplication of effort that happens across the Institute, right? Where like at no fault, like nobody's maliciously trying to like keep information away from someone else, but you just don't know what else is happening. The Institute is vast, many, many, many different groups. And so the opportunity to bring those folks together and to have them collaborate, this idea of generating kind of a knowledge database where you could make those connections. Hey, you're talking about AI and we're talking about AI. Let's connect on what you're learning and what we're learning so that in our individual knowledge areas, we can do what we do best, but also coordinate our efforts. So I would say it is more than advisory. That perhaps is a misnomer there. Because I think there is real opportunity in connecting groups together, and I don't know that we can eliminate it, but at least lowering the occurrence of duplication and all the frustration that goes along with that. In terms of how this group informs the board, I also think this is a really critical piece to focus on. Some feedback I think that we've received over the past few months is that, you know, that hasn't always been clear, particularly for the council, right? How does the council influence board decisions? And so there are processes that are not explicit to the Knowledge Advisory Forum, but are part of the task force's recommendations that get into those feedback loops and communication cycles that are necessary processes for groups not only to lift up their feedback and their ideas, but also to hear back from the board about how that informed their conversation. Now, in this particular instance as well, we are recommending 3 seats for knowledge on the board that's new. And those folks will have specific responsibility for maintaining that feedback loop between the Knowledge Council / Knowledge Forum, whatever we're going to call it, group, and the board, and back again. So undoubtedly, strengthening those communication loops is essential. It's foundational. If I'm being honest, you could make no other changes to your board composition or anything else, and that would be the first thing I would tell you need to focus on, and making sure that people feel heard and that they understand the rationale for decision making.
Suzanne,
So, yeah,
this is
I was
Mickey.
just going to say, anybody from the task force want to jump in?
Let's make it right. What I also want to make sure that we're trying to achieve here is the ability for all the groups in knowledge to be able to connect directly with the board. So connecting through the Knowledge Advisory Forum to the seats on the board who will have specific responsibilities, as Susanna said, to be able to connect on a regular basis, but also give the opportunity for anybody in knowledge to be able to connect directly with them on an advisory with information they need. Additionally, it's going to go the other way too. What we want to do is create the pathway for the board to reach out to specific areas of knowledge through these connections in order to invite participation of the Knowledge Advisory Forum and the knowledge communities on specific issues that the board is addressing based on our strategic plan or direction, so that we're making informed decisions directly. So it's making sure that what's happening in the knowledge groups is being available and communicated with the board, but also the board being able to reach back down, specifically identify areas that they need assistance with getting information on so they can make those informed decisions and being able to invite that participation. So we're hoping that it becomes this real robust two-way street of communication to be able to utilize, all the groups to the best advantage.
Can we also clarify,
Oh, sorry. Go
Susanna,
ahead.
you said 3 seats for the knowledge advisory, and I thought it was 1 seat. I don't understand the 3 seats.
Mickey, help me out here, but there's 3 that 1 rotate each year, right?
So what we're proposing is having 3 seats that would be seated by the Knowledge Advisory Forum and the knowledge communities. They have the ability, and those are 3 seats with 3-year terms that would be staggered terms. So you would rotate one off every year and rotate.
Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha. Thank you.
And so you'd be voting for one person in those 3 seats every year, right? But and the idea is that the knowledge community, working hopefully with the board and certainly with the candidate development committee, can identify leadership to bring that has specific subject matter expertise that will really kind of assist in terms of the strategic direction and certainly issues that we're going to be facing in the industry. So that's the idea that we're bringing forward with that.
Thank you. And Susanna, there's chatter in the chat about small firm exchange versus large firm roundtable. And Caitlin, you can probably help me with this. The small firm exchange is technically a knowledge community, correct? Kind of. It's in that group.
That is not correct.
Yeah, that's not correct.
knowledge
They're not currently part of any traditional member group or knowledge.
We are a member group. Okay, that is what we have state representatives, and we are a member group. Okay, so that's what we are set up as.
All right,
Whether or
and
not
Joshua,
we
I
have
just
moving
looked
to the
you.
future is a different story.
Yes.
I just looked you up on the community list, and you're listed in the community home in the same way that the knowledge communities are listed, which is why I was confused about that. All right, but then thank you for that clarification though, but the large firm roundtable, Caitlin, what is that? That's a different kind of group.
Yeah, the large firm roundtable is actually technically a separate legal entity. AIA manages it, but for all intents and purposes, large firm roundtable is a separate legal entity. So AIA helps support them for a staff structure, but they are not part of our governance structure.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly, you've had your hand raised here. I'd like to invite you into the conversation.
Thank you, Susanna. I just wanted to reiterate what Joshua was saying, and also Mickey. When we use the term knowledge, I think it waters it down. Most of these groups are subject matter experts and leaders in different typologies, facets of our industry. So I guess I'm concerned about it being watered down by having constituency groups as part of that, because for a long time, the knowledge committee has been othered in my mind from the AIA. It's been this aside, that's where the geeks are, just, to put it in a bit of a strange term. At least that's how I always felt when I was on the council. It was something that, wasn't really active in leadership conversations. And to Mickey's point, they should be, because they're subject matter experts. And so that's why I would advocate that we maintain, not necessarily suggesting using the word, but keeping that in mind when we're thinking about how to leverage that incredible skill set and knowledge base to better and further advance the AIA.
I really appreciate that perspective, and I'm curious to hear from the group about composition. Admittedly, we've bounced around a little bit about, should it just be KC? Should it be other knowledge groups? There are other committees within the Institute that focus on knowledge topics, right? The issue of constituency groups and where they go is, I think, a really good debate. I'd be curious to hear from the group, how do folks feel about that? Do you feel like NAC and YF and SFX belong someplace other than the Knowledge Forum? And then by extension, are there other groups that maybe have a knowledge role but aren't a KC and should be in the knowledge group?
Could I jump in here? Ken Filarski here.
Sure, go for it.
It's I think number one, we have to recognize the fact that the most important part of the American Institute of Architects is the last word, architect. And unless all this governance can show value to the individual architect, we will have a key performance indicator either our membership will grow or it will decline. And so there needs to be some. Let's put it this way: architects by nature, or what we claim to do, there's almost no boundary, or the boundary is fuzzy. And when we're talking about a knowledge community or subject matter expert, there's always there's tangents all around that circle or that sphere, and it's going to go off to a number of different places. So number one, I think that the governance task force has to recognize the fact that if they're successful, number one, it's AI will be an organization that architects will want to belong to, and also be an organization architects will want to lead. Which goes to my next point. I'm a little bit wary of the use of leadership as in the knowledge communities, the task forces, whatever you want to call it, as being a pathway to leadership. There's a difference between, say, elected leadership and then leadership within knowledge. And I would hate to see that the individual architect has the impression that the only way somebody can be elected leader is through these groups. Another example that I came across is that right now the Strategic Council, they're split, not split up, but they're organized around subject matter explorations, neuroarchitecture, housing, whatnot. So there's an overlap there that it's in other words, there's not a clean break. There's not a discrete definition because boundaries are going to be crossed over, and so it gets back to, I guess, my last point is that what we need to do is, because by our nature and our exploration of knowledge and interest in the world, we're going to be extending over to other areas of interest, knowledge, and whatnot. So how is that effectively communicated? And the governance task force really doesn't. I don't right now. I don't hear how it's dealing with the how. How is that knowledge and information crossed over? One small example, the White House ballroom example. We had one AI group, the College of Fellows, and another group. They're talking about what to do, and they're all eclectic about the White House ballroom, but they weren't talking to each other because there was no crossover and transfer of information. So we have to figure out how to make our website better. How does the single member get better knowledge, not of knowledge per se, but a knowledge of what's going on in the institute so they could tap into it.
Thank you. You know, in this category of how, we also could explore a little bit about expectations of members of the forum. I'm going to keep saying that because I know we're probably going to evolve the term, but bear with me. So if you think about, you know, what are the needs or expectations, I should say, of a knowledge advisory forum member? There's been some discussion that it should just be KCs, that constituency groups don't belong here. But when you think about, like, just generally, those people that are sitting there, what are your expectations for that role? And what does that look like? We talked about reporting back and forth, right? Coordinating activities. Is there anything else that we're missing?
Susanna,
Yes.
when I was chair of Bonocco and also being a member of Committee on Design and super interested in public architecture because that was where I used to live. Um, you know, it was interesting to me to see the composition of Bonocco. It was represented not only the KCs, it also included members of YAF, and everybody wanted to build that pipeline, and NAC. There were also, what also fascinated me was what was going on in academia and research. And so there was that cross current and sharing of information, which I thought was really invaluable to not only the KCs, but also to the Institute, and thinking and how to convey that, the trends, not trends, yeah, and also what was needed in the field and the profession. So I really would like to see some more of that kind of mix.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the strong desire for everybody to have a seat at the table, right? And representation. But at the same time, I really appreciated looking at the future and what's happening now and having this very rich, kind of robust kind of soup of knowledge.
Soup of people. Wait a minute, that's
Yes,
not it.
indeed, soup of people. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. But you get what I'm saying.
Yes. So maybe looking at the composition again, there's some, if not at-large seats that are reserved for the like someone from the academy, someone from these different kind of they're not outside groups, but different perspectives. Yeah? Okay.
Yes, and different sectors of the profession that
Right.
that bring knowledge, like you were saying. I would even appreciate having someone who is organizing conference or convention because so many of our
Mm.
KCs are interested in bringing if they're not represented necessarily, but bringing some of their folks to serve in those leadership roles or presentation and sharing their programs.
Great. That's helpful.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
So I would also like to know if the knowledge committees could have a role in selecting the presentations that goes in the AIA National. Like if there is a category that these are the types of presentations that are going to go, like being able to sit in the jury. I know there was a call that went out to everyone, but if there is a knowledge committee role in that, that would be nice, I think. And secondly, as far as public architecture committee, there is a lot of work that's going to come to private sector because of the size of government is now smaller. However, I know there is a AIA governance committee, but I would like to get more feedback from them and learn what they're doing and what our members can use from their knowledge.
So I am not familiar with the current process for how convention sessions are selected, but we will make note of your suggestion that we consider a liaison between that group and the Knowledge Advisory Forum. I'm not sure I followed your second question though, as it related to shifts, trends in building types, and could you ask that again?
Yeah, no, I would like to have the knowledge committee, especially our committee, to have more information on procurement process and
Ah.
new trends that are federal government and local government are doing because there's a lot of changes regarding hub certification, SBE, and also how they're going to outsource more work.
Got you. Okay, yes, I agree. I think I could envision a very robust dialogue with sharing information on trends that would generate lots of dialogue between and among the members of the forum. I was uh, I was still tracking on composition though, so that's why I misunderstood. But thank you. That is a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Just catching up in the chat here. Thanks to our task force members who are also jumping in as well. Jessica.
Yeah, I actually wrote something in the chat about this, but I feel like I work with the building performance KC, but also the codes and standards committee. And I feel like codes and standards is so strange and kind of like off to the side, but codes and standards is literally why we're licensed. So I don't understand kind of that disconnect. And we need to somehow have that more integrated into the things that we do and what we're working on. And it's like I understand why resilience and sustainability take up a lot of space in architectural discourse, but energy code is changing what we're responsible for as architects and what we need to do as architects to get our clients certificates of occupancy. And I don't think most architects probably even know how to do that. Do you know how to commission your envelope? Do you know how to write a report for an air barrier? Do you know how to do the testing that's required to do that? Because guess what? You have to do that in a lot of states now. If you have 2021 IECC or 2024 IECC, we're losing the battle on, to IBEC and other professionals that are now like niche professionals. But these are important things that are being taken away from us. We're not taken away from us, but it's like we don't talk about it. It's like it's great that we have the code top 10, but these developments in codes are important to every architect, I think, and important to our future. And I'm not sure why codes and standards is sort of orphaned in the advocacy space. I understand advocacy is important and both things are important, but it's just kind of like, it's not a KC, it's sort of a committee, it's sort of volunteer, but it's sort of
well, and I'm hearing you say
its own.
you think of it as a knowledge group, right? That there's a practice component to codes and standards that's more than advocacy. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't meet code, you're not an architect, right? I don't know what it is you are, but you're not an architect for sure. Like codes is why we have a license. Meeting building codes, being responsible for health, safety, and welfare is why we're licensed.
So Jessica, would you see it as a step in the right direction for groups that have practice components to their charge, like codes and standards, to be included in this knowledge forum?
I think so. I think it's important. I mean,
are there other groups like that
right
that we should be paying attention to?
I think it's sort of universal. It's a little bit universal in the way that small firms is universal, in the way that Young Architects Forum is universal, right? Like that most of our membership is from small firms, that we have to worry about everyone's career path. We have to worry about codes and their development and its impact on the profession in a similar way, I guess.
I appreciate that. Thanks for lifting that up. Earlier, when we were talking about composition, we were kind of playing with this idea of maybe constituency groups not being the right home here in knowledge. Maybe that is over at the council or another solution. But now, again, I want to expand out, building on Jessica's comments about other groups that have a practice element. What might that look like? Any that immediately come to mind that you're like, oh my gosh, we need to think about this group. Resilience, right? I think that that's a group that's not a KC, but might be considered a practice group.
Well, Alan Scott and I sit on the radar committee for AIA, and before that, the disaster assistance committee. It brings up another point in that resilience really cuts. I mean, it's sort of part of the strategic plan and other things, but it really cuts across everything that we're talking about now and moving forward in the future. So there's an example of how different AI communities, whether it's the strategic council or the knowledge committees, how they need to know what's going on in other areas that are actually part and parcel of today and tomorrow's practice. So how does that information get across? That's extremely important. And going back to codes and standards, I didn't finish my chat here, is that it takes a long time to develop. What AI has to learn is what is the timetable, the sequence for developing codes and standards, whether it be flood design resistant construction or the building codes or whatnot, and then how to get involved in that, because there's a myriad of other interests involved in that as well. So what we have to do, because because codes are the bare minimum, how do we elevate the bare minimum to something that's above bare minimum, that's conducive to better design, resiliency, sustainability, and regeneration?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. And I was just going to add that because resilience is part of the architect's evolving standard of care, it really is a knowledge element that needs to
Yeah.
be communicated broadly.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Susanna, I love going back to that crazy org chart, the one
Yeah.
with all the little
Bubbles.
arrows and other things
Yep.
that go all over the place. But there are groups like the Center for Practice and as Alan and Ken and others have talked about sustainability and resilience committees. So I think we might want to look at that crazy mixed up org chart again.
Okay. We can do that.
Going back to what Susan just said, the org chart should be able to be mobile. It should be able to go up and down, left, sideways, right and left, and emphasize certain things based upon what's relevant, again, for the now and the future of architects and architecture. I don't think it's static.
Just skimming the chat, there's a lot of good feedback in here, and forgive me if I've missed anybody's question. And I appreciate Jessica coming off mute because I saw it and then I didn't get back to it. So let's see, lifting up also a connection between the knowledge forum. We talked about connecting to the conference education selection process, but also awards juries. As I know a lot of KCs have awards themselves too. Let's see, what else do we want to lift up here? Caitlin, did you see anything in the chat that you think would be valuable to share back with the group, or other questions I may have missed?
We've been answering them along the way. I did like some of the things that resonated with me as people were talking, sharing up is, right, the question about these other committees and how do they interact with this proposed governance framework. I think one of the things we can do as a governance task force is really to do a case study and tease that out a little bit more and truly show people how in this future model, committees like the CE committee, the Center of Practice, codes and standards, how they would then interact with bodies like the Council on Future State or the Knowledge Advisory Forum. In my mind, as I was thinking this through and hearing the discussion, I think by creating a body like the Knowledge Advisory Forum as a unified body that represents all of the KC knowledge, it creates a clear connection point for those committees to have a connection with all the KCs in one place, versus right now that they would have to have individual conversations and hear and lift up the different voices from all the individual KCs. But I think we need to show people what that would look like in future state to really help it let them see how it would work. So, but in terms of what's in the chat, there's a lot of great feedback. I've seen a lot of hearts and thumbs up, just reiterating some of the things that we have to either follow up on or just amplify. So
great, good. Yep. Keep the stuff in the chat coming. I do want to mention, Joshua, I see your hand raised. I do want to mention that there are 3 more of these sessions that are going to happen throughout this week. And we'll share some information about that if you might be particularly interested in knowledge and whatever, but there'll be one on council, one on board committees, and then a third, fourth, really, including this one on roles and responsibilities as well as board composition. So please feel free to join any of those as your interest is piqued, and we'll be going deep on all of those topics. Joshua.
I just wanted to point out, Kathleen had placed 2 links in the chat. One was for peer review for AIA 27. I've done this the last couple of years, and if you're really interested in making sure that conference has talks that are appealing to architects, then you should volunteer for that. I think it's important, it's easy, and you get to see a lot more things that could come to conference as well. There's also, Kathleen also put a volunteer opportunities up as well if you want to engage further.
Cool. Thanks for shouting that out. Raya?
Yes, I have a question regarding if anybody can share their experience, who has experienced this firsthand, when there is a voice for the council, representation voice versus knowledge advisory forum voice. Do they always it works together, or if any experience in how these two work, whether together or sometimes they point different direction? How is that from an experience point of view?
So I think it is envision. Mickey, you're coming off of mute. I'm going to yield to you.
I think that's part of our effort, is to clarify that a little better. I think it's confusing right now to a lot of people how that voice is heard and how it's generated up into the governance structure, which I think you're trying to reference. And I think it goes deeper than that. It's an ability to involve all of our members in the work that's being done. I think, to kind of piggyback on what Kenneth had said, that the work of all our knowledge communities, the strategic council, all that great stuff going on, if we can't get that down into the day-to-day practice of architecture in our firm and member network that they can use to help them be better in what they do, then we failed. And so that's part of the objective of this, is to create an opportunity and hopefully a vehicle in which this information can be shared, it can be reposited in some kind of a structure in order for members to be able to reach in and identify things that will help benefit them in their day-to-day practice, and that they can apply in that practice, again, to help them be better, to be more competitive in the marketplace, to service their clients better and create better, more beautiful and more effective, efficient designs. And that's the ideal that hopefully we're trying to get to this, and looking to all of these groups to work together to kind of really reach that objective.
I would highlight too, there's a new, we're not talking about board committees here on this call, but there is a new committee that's been proposed called the Strategic Planning Committee, a way for the council and the board to be better connected as it relates to setting strategic priorities. But it is envisioned that there would be representatives from knowledge on the Strategic Planning Committee and informing that process. So I think there are a few different connection points that are envisioned in the recommendations, particularly as it relates again into those weedy details about communications and a few other places in the document. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Then I see Joshua's hand up. I didn't know if you.
Oh, I think his hand. Oh, it's still from before. Okay.
Sorry, that was
All
from
good.
before.
All good.
Yeah.
Susanna, one of the questions that you asked in the document that you sent around was the kind of the representation issue. Whether there's several options that are under consideration. I mean, I think what's most important is that all of the knowledge communities and the constituency groups have a strong feeling that their voice is going to be heard all the way to the board.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the most critical thing to me, is that communication topic. And so, I mean, I've been kind of bouncing this around in my head too, whether the kind of representation is larger because your KC is larger or not. I mean, that's a tricky one for me, but in a way, I like to think that, the strategic council, I think the argument against it has been is it's going to be too big if we let every KC or constituency group, have a seat. My feeling is you've got a strategic council now that's got I don't know how many members, 60 or something like that. And I guess they found a way to make that work. I mean, why can't you make it work so that each of the knowledge communities and constituency groups, has a place, their voice can be heard. And then it's really up to the leadership of whatever we call this, a council or a forum, to make sure that you bring this information to the board. It's important. All of these, some people only touch AIA through the knowledge communities. Others touch it only through their local component. There has to be a way to make sure that the thoughts of all members find their way, and it's a clear path to the board.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. And look, we threw out a few different options, more just to get the conversation started. Arguably, the solution that moves forward will probably be a hybrid of some of the different ideas that have been thrown out there. But at the simplest level, you can see council as more of a House of Representatives model, and possibly the knowledge side as being more of a Senate model, right? Where there's one rep per KC. Rather than weighting by the number of people that are associated with that KC. I think that can also get tricky in terms of how people check the box, and that could get political. So just to say, I think there is a strong argument for that. And depending upon constituency groups and these other groups that are represented, maybe we could do some work to map that out. And perhaps the number isn't that big. 21 KCs plus a handful of other practice-related committees. It's half the size of the council.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of that.
Yeah. Okay.
So people don't feel like they're left out.
Yeah. And George, this is Mickey. I think to follow up on what you're saying and to kind of support what you're saying, I think as part of our communication plan and bringing this forward is to make sure that everybody, each member, each component, case, each constituency group, each KC, all of them have a direct pathway to be able to communicate with a board member. Exactly. And part of the responsibility of a board member as we move forward will be assigned to be that direct pathway in, so that they can be not only just communicating with, but also to champion certain things and issues that come forward to be able to bring them to the board deliberations. So we're really trying to make sure that we're creating these very distinct pathways to be able to do that directly with the board, and obviously with support of staff. But, that's part of this big pot of stew that we're putting together with all of this to see how that can work.
Thanks.
Joshua, last word. At 1:59 p.m. Eastern Time.
I know right now the Bonoco assigns its members to each KC.
Yes.
Will the KC boards be selecting their own membership to join this committee?
Good question. What do you think?
I think absolutely. We should have boards choose the members.
Yeah. So the KC advisory, do we call them advisory committees or advisory groups? Nominate their own individual. I know in a prior call we had chatted about like, it could be the past chair, or it could be this group. Well, you can just, each group could decide. It could make sense that it be your past chair, but you would have authority to do that, to select who that would be. That sounds about right. I'm seeing like some nodding, at least from the people who have their cameras on, that seem to get a reaction. Okay, cool. I got a thumbs up. That's good.
Yeah, Joshua, Mickey again. I agree. I think that the KCs, each individual KC is absolutely the right way to be able to nominate who represents them going up forward on that. That's just, they know better. They know the people, they know the issues, and that's and it also gives each of those groups the ability to bring forward their leaders that they think will best represent them, and they have the best background, the best knowledge, and to be able to do that. So I think that's a real strong recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for your time, your attention, your feedback, your ideas. Keep it coming. You have there's continues to be ways to give input and feedback. We're not done. as we mentioned at the beginning, we want to continue to iterate on this, and it'll take as long or as short as it needs to get it right. So thanks again for the knowledge conversation today. Maybe we'll see you at a future one.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.